Let's talk for a minute broadly about costs. I'm giving you a folder with a couple of readings in here. I'm not trying to get mathematical on you. I'm going to talk concept. What I want to look at, could you look at the screen on that camera and be sure I'm still in the picture?
Yes, you are.
I'm going to look at this, just like a supply and demand graph. This is dollars on the vertical axis. It may be price, but now it's going to be costs, but it's measured in dollars. And this is output, Q. How many units are we producing? And I want you to have a handle on a little bit of terminology, but the concept. The traditional shape of the cost curve in economics that we discuss is a U-shape.
Yeah, curve.
It's U-shaped. The concepts behind that are really important. The probability of you running into that shape of curve in reality is somewhat more limited. So I don't beat it to death, but let me tell you what they're trying to describe. They're saying, look, when we operate our factory, we can choose to produce between a 0 and, let's say, 1,000 units a day. That's how much we can produce, whatever the hell it is we're producing. And if we produce from 0 out to some number, let's call it 127. As we increase production to 1 or 2 or 3 and so on, and keep producing, what happens to our cost per unit? That's what we call our average cost, the cost per unit. And the general idea is that first unit or two are pretty darn expensive. Maybe they cost us $100 a piece if that's all we produced. Maybe I'm producing, I don't know, pet rocks. And if I only make 2 of them a day, they're going to cost me a couple of $100 a piece. Why?
You've got your fixed costs.
Because I've got all these fixed costs. My rent, my utilities, my trip to the Bahamas with the secretary, and all the other fixed expenses of running the business have got to be absorbed by 2 units. So I'm not spreading those fixed costs out. That's one thing. If this is in fact a production factory, we're making canoes. What happens is as I start producing more canoes per day or per week?
Your costs go down.
Why?
Because
you have all the supplies.
you already have the supplies.
I'm going to go out and I'm going to start buying fiberglass and metal and wood in large quantities, and I'm going to get some volume discounts. That's good.
And a lot of your initial costs will already be absorbed.
Yeah.
Because you've already...
Like equipment and stuff like that you had to buy.
Well, that's part of I'm going to depreciate my equipment, and that's part of my overhead. Okay, that's a given.
That's accounting.
What else is going to happen, though, is I start bringing in raw materials and we start producing more canoes, we're going to learn how to do it better. We call that
efficiency.
Call it a learning curve. Okay? What's a learning curve? I hope I'm still. I just draw it right here real quick. Okay? This is time or number of repetitions if I'm just building stuff repeatedly. And this is efficiency, where I don't waste anything and I do it really fast. And what happens is my learning curve typically looks like this. It starts off kind of slow. Remember the first time you tried to learn to use a keyboard?
Yes.
How good were you?
They're hunting and pecking.
What happened after the first week? Hopefully you learned at least where the home keys were, and you began to, and after 3 or 4 weeks, you're really starting to speed up. And that's what happens. You start off kind of slow, so maybe the first week you're really terrible, but in the next week, your speed increases considerably because you're learning the routine. And then, if you keep at it for a while, you keep getting faster and more efficient until eventually you start to slow down again. And you reach maybe your very best, your peak efficiency. That's a typical learning curve. When we start doing more of anything, if you did more of these problems, your efficiency would become much better. You'd be more accurate, you'd be faster. You'd be crazy. Tell me what this learning curve means. Right here.
You're an expert starting off.
You are a quick learner or it's a really simple skill. Sure. What does this learning curve mean?
Stupid.
It took you a very long
It took
time.
you a while.
It's a
to learn
difficult
it.
task, or you're kind of slow at learning. What does this one mean then, okay?
You're
Well,
not
you never got it. You're dead.
fired.
Oh, that's you. Cheap shot, I know. Okay, so we want to remember the idea of a learning curve, and from a managerial perspective, you know, change is a constant. Things are constantly changing. New software, new procedures, new regulations, and there's always resistance to change. But if you can identify those episodes or those situations where you know with a little intense effort, people can be brought up to speed in a hurry. You can speed up their learning curve. You want to look for those opportunities and not let that training drag out. So sometimes there's a need to just take people and pay them for an extra day's work and make them come to work on Saturday. And by God, everybody's going to learn how to do this today. Boom, learning curve done, get on with life. If instead you sit around and you listen to people complain, and every time you try to get them to start learning it, there's an interruption for this, or 3 people couldn't make training, your learning curve starts to look like you went to FSU. So that's the management perspective on that. Okay, so what happens? As I start producing more units, my cost per unit falls. I'm buying in volume, I'm spreading out overhead, I've got a learning curve going on. And probably in a production factory, I'm going to have people specializing in certain tasks. You do the framing, you lay the fiberglass, you do the painting, you put the metal stuff on it, and we really get efficient. And maybe we even buy some better equipment that helps us improve as well. So you can drive your costs down to a certain point. Now typically once you get those costs down to a point, you'll have a period of time or a range of production between 127 and 703 units per week or whatever schedule we're talking about. And your costs are going to look something like this, kind of a flat line. What is that flat line telling you?
That you're breaking even.
Not quite break it even because we're not talking about revenue, but every time I produce another canoe,
Consistent.
consistent of what?
Costs?
Costs. It cost me the same as the last one. That I have driven it down to the point where now I can make canoes for $112 a piece. And so I'm going to typically,
Now if you started at 100.
okay, I can make canoes for $22. Critics, okay? I wanted you to take that home and sweat on it for a week.
Yeah, like,
How the hell did you do that?
Is this going to be in the exam, the cost portion, or just?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So should I start over? Or?
No. Cheeky.
You can produce them at a constant cost per unit. If you get to the point that you start to make even more canoes, what's going on in your factory? You're trying to produce 800, 900 canoes a month now. What's it like in that factory?
Crowded.
Well, at some point in time, it's going to get stressful.
Chaotic?
your employee's gonna be worn out. Tired.
What's going to be out there on the back of your factory at the loading dock where they bring in the raw materials? What's going on out there? Constant deliveries of raw material, constantly getting offloaded, but nobody has enough time to organize it, so they just shove it over here and shove it over there. And then when I turned to you on the factory floor one day and said, we need another 5-gallon can of red paint, how long does it take you to find it? The rest of the day, because you're sorting through stuff out there. What else is going on? What's going on right there on the production floor where we're trying to move these canoes down the assembly line?
Equipment breakdown.
Equipment breakdown because we're running it so rapidly, we're not maintaining it. Okay, what else is going on?
You can get injuries if you're doing it too quickly.
More injuries, absolutely. And then when somebody gets injured, particularly if they're skilled,
They're out.
how do you replace them? You know,
You have to hire,
Because
you
your
know,
efficiency.
you hire inexperienced and inefficient help. What else?
The costs go up again.
Why are my costs going up?
Because of all those things.
Because I'm losing materials, I'm slowing down my production. What about unhappy employees? Might I have some of those?
yes.
Oh yeah, particularly if I've got micromanager supervisors who are out there, you know, beating people with a whip and screaming at them. Morale goes down, and after you scream at me a couple of times today, what might I do besides punch you out?
Quit.
Quit. Nah, I'm longer on revenge than that.
Steal
Mistakes.
something.
First, I'm going to make some mistakes. Next time that next canoe comes down, I'm going to take a screwdriver and just shove a couple of holes in it and let it go on by. Just paint over it.
So quality's gonna go down.
Quality's going to deteriorate. And then come the end of the day when it's about time to go home and I'm walking out to my car, I'm going to go walking out on that back dock where everything's a mess, and I'm going to steal enough lumber to build my boy a tree house. And I'm going to run into 3 other employees who are out there helping themselves too, because the man, the boss, is a jerk. And so, as a result of trying to increase your production too far, your cost per unit starts to escalate. You with me so far? Most of us, in most of the businesses we operate, are operating in this second range here, what we call constant costs. But we have to beware if we are going to be in a management role. When you push your people or your other resources too far, too hard, for too long, your costs are going to start going up. And you better be aware of that. Monitor it and recognize what's causing it.
So like, especially with this last depression, more employees made their workers do more with less.
That's, yeah, the last 2 recessions we've had, for the last 10 years at least. Every time we have a slowdown in the economy, businesses have laid people off and taken the ones remaining and made them do more. And that has made it look like these people are incredibly productive. They're doing as much now with 50 people as they used to do with 100. Yeah, well, you better take a close look at those 50 people.
You're burning them out.
A, you're burning them out and you're making them unhappy. But if they're that damn good and they got any sense, what's going to happen when the economy recovers?
They're going to bail ship.
They're going to bail. They're going to find them a better job. And if they're not stupid, nobody in this room better be stupid, what's the first thing you do when you get a job? You start looking for your next one. You keep your networks up, you keep your resume updated, and you maybe even talk to a headhunter every once in a while. What's a headhunter?
He's
Someone that
someone
specializes
A professional who finds people for jobs. My son's a mechanical engineer. He's got 2 or 3 headhunters that he's in contact with all year long. And they're constantly saying, well, here, this is coming open and this is out here. Would you like that? Yes, that's what happens.
I thought he was living in a trailer out
No, that was, we almost got to that point at one time, but he's a pretty good kid. So.
Does he still live here in Gainesville?
Yeah. You've been here very long? Do you know where Drill Tech was up in Alachua? The drilling company? That's where he got his first job experience as a mechanical engineer. Very, very instructive.
My
Is he
girlfriend.
still looking?
Oh no, he's up in Maryland now. If you go to these rental companies that rent, you know what a man lift is? It's a trailer with a big long arm on it. His company is JLG. They make those things. He's doing real well with that.
Now my girlfriend is a manager at CH2M Hill in Orlando, and they're always have feelers out. I mean, especially here at UF because they have an office here right across where I work. And she goes, sometimes there's more competition than there's people that we need to fill.
Sure. I'm teaching the management course, the first course in the supervision and organizational management degree now, the new degree. And a lot of what I do in that course is talk about networking, career management, relationships, not just with your subordinates, but with your superiors. I mean, so much of the world today is more and more dependent on connections.
Who you know.
Who you know and not what you know.
And it bothers me because we're used to the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's a damn lie. If you don't know nothing, you ain't worth a damn. I don't care who you know. And by the way, if you come to me and say, Strickland, I'm looking for a job, and I think you don't know nothing, you think I'm going to help you find a job? I'm not putting my reputation on the line for you. So, yeah, it's what you know, assuming in you that you know how to do something, that you're productive.
And it's funny, with insurance, for each job, because you're always in touch with attorneys, other insurance companies, agents, and it's just a network that just builds up like that.
That's right.
You know?
I have people come to me and they say, I can't find a job. And my advice is sit down and write down the list of every person you know. And then find the top 10 people on there that you think are well connected and that know you reasonably well. And let's set you up. I want you to go talk to each one of them. Take them your resume, explain to them what you've been doing, what your skills are, and ask them if they have some advice. And if you create a good enough rapport and conversation, nurture the relationship, and then ask them if they could possibly refer you to someone who may be looking for someone with your skills. And if you'll go through maybe the top 30 people on your list, my thinking is you got a high probability of getting a job. If, on the other hand, you simply go down to Kinko's and print off 3,000 resumes and send them out to anybody you know who doesn't know you, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, because most of them either get filed away or
That's right.
with all the other thousands of people that are going to the same job.
Exactly. So, this first range here, where I'm starting to increase my level of output and I'm starting to get pretty good at it, is called economies of scale. All right? That means the more you do, the better you get at it. In this case, the cheaper you can do it. But for you or me, it might mean the faster we can perform a particular function. So we have economies of scale, constant cost, also called constant returns to scale, but you don't need to use that. And then over here, when you're doing so much that your efficiency is suffering, your costs are going up, your morale is plummeting, your performance is falling, this is the diseconomies of scale. Do you suppose this cost structure applies to the operation of a household?
Yes.
Give me an example how.
I should know because I'm a household.
Like keeping a household, or just a mother starts off with this much energy and with all the tasks that she has, she is quick, but the time night comes, she is burnt out and she slows down and her productivity goes down. And
That's a good analogy.
Okay, that's true in terms of productivity. But I would argue this, that even running a household, after you've done it for a few weeks or months or years, you've got pretty damn good at it. You've learned how to bring it down into here and become much more efficient. It may mean allocating chores to children. It may mean that you get a better vacuum cleaner so that you can do the job in half the time. It may mean that, making any number of changes in the way you do things.
Put it to groceries.
Huh?
Put it to groceries.
Put it to groceries?
When I've got time, I'm at Save-A-Lot, I'm checking out pennies and everything else. And then I get a nice little level. But when I'm busy, here's 20 bucks, go buy a pizza.
Go back over here.
When I'm in that, it's triple the grocery budget because I don't have time to shop, I don't have time to cook, I just don't have time. So it's
And so we have
go get Burger King, go get Pizza Hut.
like cleaning, it's like that's always an area of contention in my household. But
gee, I've never experienced that.
like with my economies of scale, it's actually getting laundry done, getting the dishes done, constant cost. I can keep up with it during the week. It's just like I just have to touch up. And this economy of scale is when it just goes to hell. The husband gets yelled at, the dog gets yelled at.
Yeah. And you take the clothes to the cleaners.
How efficient are you in the kitchen at cooking?
I'm very efficient.
When you finish the meal, and then you serve it, and then you come back after serving it, is the kitchen clean?
Hell no.
See, I think I'm pretty damn efficient that way, because while I got something cooking over here, I'm cleaning this off, either putting it in the dishwasher or drying it. I got this going, I got this going. I think I'm way down in here.
that's what I do.
No.
Like something's cooking, I'm like, oh, let me clean this cutting board and these knives, I'm done with this, and then I put it to dry.
But then I watch someone else, and I'm not saying her name, but it's the wreck of the Hesperus. It's a hell of a good meal, but I look in the kitchen.
You look in the kitchen and it's like...
Look, if I cook, you clean. This is how it is. And if he doesn't clean, I don't cook. And I had a...
That's the way it is with my children.
And one time, I just had a strike. And I'm like...
You had a strike.
I went on strike, man.
No, I take the other approach. Tonight's my night. I'll cook and clean.
It takes an act of God.
I'm sorry?
It takes an act of God for him to say that.
Oh.
or he's in trouble. Like, what'd you do?
Oh.
And so now we're into supervision, management, discipline,
Punishment.
punishment. Okay, that's a big thing on costs. Sometimes you'll see a problem, and you may see this over the next exam too. Marginal cost is given as a constant number, $8. $8 per unit every time you produce another one. What they're saying is that your marginal cost curve, if you drew it on the graph, is just a horizontal line. That's the constant cost part of the curve. There is no diseconomies or economies of scale. So, recognize that if you see it, constant costs. No big deal. I think one of the things it is very difficult to teach in any educational program is working in an organization and trying to get a handle on the costs. Trying to figure out how much everything is costing and how much money is really being poorly spent.
That's what they always like, whenever time we have like our quarterly, it's like our expenses are always out of control. We can never, you know, they say like our expenses are, they just go, they fluctuate. And you always say you need to handle your expenses, but doing what we do is like, you can't handle what you can't predict, you know?
Well, if you can't predict it, that's one thing. But too often you've got so much going on, you're way down in that diseconomies of scale. You're not controlling your costs because you've got too much else to do. Yeah. And if you're the manager in charge of a department of 15 people and your expenses are going up, what are you going to do about it?
Well, first you got to analyze what your expenses are.
Yeah.
Once you can identify them, is, you know, are those expenses going up because of labor? Or you got a bunch of people putting in overtime?
Are we buying a lot more office paper clips than we used to, and why?
Because somebody's taking them out the back door and we never have any?
Yeah.
Well,
but my point is this, if you're working for me, and you've got that department over there with 15 people, and I say, your budget's crazy, your expenses have gone insane for the last 2 years, what are you going to do about it? How do you teach that? I mean, you've got to get buried in the details and start tracking stuff. And what's the one rule about management? If it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. And so you've got to account for things in a quantitative way in order to measure what people are doing to get control of your costs. Now, go ahead.
Well, in my experience, when it gets to that point, it's because they're micromanaging too much. They're not, the manager's not doing manager job. They're on their subordinates and making sure they're not doing the managerial positions.
Right. But sometimes, when nobody else is doing the micromanagement or accountability of the suppliers, you got to wade down in there yourself and find out what's going on. Yeah. And that takes away from the time you should be spending
on everything else.
And everything else. Yeah. Okay, just making a point.